And we are recording. All right, this thing is off and running. Welcome, everyone, to episode 5 of the Bore and Stoke podcast, brought to you by the 50th anniversary Honda Goldwing. I'm Troy, joined by Ryan, Dennis, and Nick. All 4 of us are back this time around for this episode, so that's very cool. Thanks, everyone, for watching or listening. However you're consuming this, we are glad to have you with us. If you haven't seen or listened to episodes 1, 2, 3, or 4, please do that. That'd be very cool.
Yeah, I mean, especially 2 and 4, at least, because there are interesting people on those.
For sure. Spoiler alert, episode 2 was Miguel Galuzzi, episode 4 was Ken Hill. So if you want to know more about just motorcycle design and or how to ride better, episodes 2 and 4 will bring you up to speed. Episodes 1 and 3 are just pretty much us rambling, so
get ready for it.
Not missing a whole lot, I guess. So now that we've got the past episodes out of the way, what can you expect from this one? Well, we're going to get into some industry news, get into some bike stuff, obviously, and then a quick recap of the bikes we've tested, and we'll be joined by a special guest in a few minutes. Before we get into all that we have to offer this episode, let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. 50 years ago, Honda dropped the first Goldwing and pretty much invented the whole touring category. Total game changer. And while we didn't invent podcasts, we are bringing a fresh take to the moto world with this one. So hey, maybe in 50 years, we'll be celebrating our podcast anniversary, just like Honda is celebrating the Goldwings. Bore and Stoke is brought to you by Honda Powersports, and this episode is powered by the 50th anniversary Goldwing. If you're going to ride something legendary. Cool. So let's get into topic number 1. MotoGP is getting bought by Liberty Media.
What?
Good, bad, ugly. What do we know about that? Dennis, I think you probably have a lot of the info on that news. Care to share more about that?
Well, yeah, the latest news this week is that Liberty Media has received the go-ahead from the European Commission to go ahead with its purchase of Dorna, which includes MotoGP as well as World Superbikes and all the related subclasses. They say that they've received approval everywhere else that it needed to, so they expect the deal should be complete by July 3rd. So if you're listening to this podcast, depending on when you listen in, it probably already happened.
And this is important. Why?
Well, it's important because first of all, if for people who aren't familiar, they also own the rights to Formula One. So we have both 4-wheel and 2-wheel racing all under the same umbrella. It's also important too that Liberty Media is American. In recent years, the U.S. presence in MotoGP has waned somewhat. We're down to 1 race now. But one of the things that they did with Formula One was really increase the presence in the U.S., and we're hoping to see something similar here with MotoGP.
Yeah, I mean, that whole Drive to Survive series was a big push from Liberty Media, right? And, call it corny or call whatever you want, but it brought eyeballs to Formula One. And so I think if Liberty can have that same sort of success with MotoGP, I think we all win.
Yeah, I mean, it'd also be great to get some American riders back in the series too. So maybe this will, have a little bit of a push on that. And we kind of hoped it would with Trackhouse, the Aprilia MotoGP team, but that didn't really pan out either. But yeah, so who knows? Maybe this will, bring up some American talent.
But I think it's important to note too that Liberty is not the 100% owner of MotoGP, right, Dennis?
Yeah, the previous ownership, Dorna Sports, their management is staying on, and they are holding on to, I think, about 16%, I think. Something like that. They're hanging on, so there's no, it's not like a sudden changeover or all new hands on there. There'll be people who are still familiar with the series. And I mean, this development has been in the works for over a year now, and we already saw a bit of a preview of that last year when they rebranded the entire MotoGP logo set. So we knew change was coming. So now we're a few days from it being official.
Yeah, and it's we don't fully know yet what Liberty is going to do to MotoGP, but as far as like the rule structures go and enforcement of the rules and things like that, I would guess, and things I've read already suggest that Liberty is kind of going to be hands off with like the overarching rule set and enforcement, and they're going to keep the actual sport still in the hands of Dorna and the FIM. Is that similar to what you're seeing too?
Yeah, the FIM ultimately is running most of the international racing series for all the different uh, segments. So they'll still have a lot of inputs. The manufacturers will also have their input as well too. And one of the reasons that Dorna is staying on with a minority ownership is that they can continue to run things as they were, or with the way that things that were planned out for the next few years.
Yeah. So I mean, the future looks bright for MotoGP. Hopefully, we can get some more American blood into the championship. Um, but overall, I think just getting more, if Liberty can bring the fan attention to MotoGP that it has to Formula One, um, I think that would be pretty big, especially when it comes to like sponsorship dollars and uh, just increased popularity is going to be a good thing for the sport.
Yeah, I
So
mean, and considering what they did with F1, I think it's highly likely that it's going to happen that way. But we'll keep our fingers crossed and we'll see what happens.
yeah, hopefully they didn't jump the shark already. So does anyone even know that reference anymore? Did I just like say a reference that
Just
nobody
dated
understands
yourself.
anymore?
There's a
Oh,
good
man.
chance. Yep.
Yeah, for anyone that's unfamiliar with Troy's reference, it's actually talking about Evil Knievel's 1986 jump over a shark, which can be
shark.
confused with the Snake River Canyon jump as well.
Thanks, Nick.
Little Evil Knievel factoids for you there.
Also, that never happened.
Yeah, I'm like, that's not actually what it's referring to, but all right.
Fake news.
Oh, we're only 10 minutes in and we're already spouting fake news. Cool.
So what's going on with Norton?
Yeah, hopefully this is
time
not
around?
hopefully this is not fake news, but Norton, maybe it is. Who knows? Yeah, is there really going to be a comeback for Norton, Dennis?
Yeah, they're now under new ownership after the previous regime had a lot of difficulties, let's say.
What a mess that was. Well, and also their new ownership is a substantial player in the industry.
Yep.
TVS Motor Company out of India. Hopefully can wipe up the mess that Stuart Garner made.
Yeah.
Where?
TVS has
Yeah, go ahead.
TVS, for those who people are not familiar, they're a very large manufacturer from India. For most of us, we probably most familiar with TVS through their collaboration with BMW for their 310 models.
Isn't TVS like not the largest Indian manufacturer, but like in the top 5, right?
And that's enough to put it,
which is still
as
huge.
One of the biggest ones in the world. So
Right. Yeah, I mean and this is not going to be like, since their most recent quote unquote comeback was just an RSV4 engine in something kind of sporty looking. These are going to be, as we've heard anyway, these are going to be new models, right? They're drawing up, engineering a couple of new models with new engines, and what can we expect from this comeback?
Well, they are expected to have something new at EICMA this November. And we also know that they're going to be using the same 450 engine that BMW showed off in their F450 GS concept last year. So that engine is going to be shared for both companies. So they'll have something small, but also probably something on a larger side as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think they mentioned 4 to 6 bikes, including a new 4-cylinder plus the 2 cylinders as well. Probably debuting at EICMA, so we'll have that to look forward to. And I know you found the trademark filings with like a modernized Norton logo, which I think there were some comments on the article, perhaps, but I kind of feel the same way. I'm not really digging it, but I think that's because the old Norton logos are so iconic. But yeah, another peek behind the curtain from Dennis Chung.
What's kind of been lost in the shuffle here is one of the hirings that Norton made. They stole basically Brian Gillen away from MV Agusta. If those who aren't familiar, Brian is an American who worked at MV Agusta for years and years and years as various different roles, but was pretty high up on the engineering chain. I mean, he knows MV Agusta's forwards and backwards because he's helped design a lot of the powertrains. He's worked in the racing department at MV Agusta. I mean, when it comes to building a motorcycle, engineering and designing a new model or a motorcycle of any type, he's the guy, and he's been the guy at MV for a while. And then Norton got him. So, I mean, that should be a pretty exciting thing for whatever these new models from Norton end up being.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, solid guy to have on the team, that's for sure, especially, when you're redeveloping a whole brand. So pretty interesting. But why don't we just take a little hop, skip, and a jump from the UK or England over to the Isle of Man.
Yeah, the Isle of Man. Yeah, by now Isle of Man is old news. You can find the results all over the place, and it's out there, easily out there. But it'd be a shame not to even mention the Isle of Man TT because it's such an iconic event. And this year, one of the things is the senior TT got cut short because of weather. So that's unfortunate.
Final race, right?
Yeah, that's the big one. That's the one they all want to get cut short because of weather. And I can, now that I've ridden the course in absolutely horrid torrential downpour. I think I was with you, Nick, right? During that, we were at that Metzler tire press event thing. We rode the Isle of Man in like torrential rain and horrible fog.
Yeah, it was a memorable one, mainly because I committed the cardinal sin of lifting my face shield. I also wear glasses. So for those of you that don't ride in inclement weather, don't do that because you immediately get moisture in your helmet. And then when you close the face shield, you basically create a greenhouse. It's the best.
But yes, when the roads of Isle of Man are on the TT course, when the weather's bad, it is, I mean, the event is dicey even in the best of weather. Once there's a drop of rain on any of that surface, it can get especially dicey and scary. So, unfortunately, we didn't get to see the final senior race, but safety comes first. But as far as I know, and I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think anyone died this year. So
I think that is the case, thankfully, which is
that's a plus.
Always good to hear. Yeah, because like you said, man, you're racing at 200 miles an hour past solid concrete wall, stone walls through villages, and just riding through the hillside at race pace. So I know Peter Hickman had a big crash, early on in the TT, who's a huge name in TT racing and racing in general, but and miraculously, ended up not too bad in the hospital for sure, but up and talking and sending Instagram and social messages out and whatnot. So good to see that. But yeah,
clearly not dead.
Clearly not dead, thankfully.
So yeah, the short of it is Michael Dunlop increased his win tally at the Isle of Man to whatever 31 now, I think it is, or something like that. Nobody died, which is always a plus, but the senior TT was called off because of weather. So, there's always next year.
Yeah, I mean, the racers didn't really seem that bummed about it either. They kind of, seemed to everyone came to terms with the fact that it was the best decision for safety.
And just to be clear, canceling races at the TT is, I wouldn't say a regular thing, but it is something that I can't think of the specific year, but they stopped racing in the rain a number of years ago. So this is just more of a safety thing. And it's almost expected at the TT because it's such an extended program. So, you're in island weather and you're going to get something throughout that time period. So,
and I mean,
bound to happen at some point. Just a bit of a shame that is the headlining act, so to speak. But yeah.
And they try their best to make sure every race gets run. I think it was the Stock 1000 race. They waited and waited and waited for the weather to clear up, and they finally set them off as the sun was going down. And you can look at some of the highlights and things on YouTube or whatever, and you'll see they start off and the sun's already really low, and then by the time they cross the finish line, it's damn near nighttime. So they try their best to make sure everything goes, but can't always happen. So if you want the results, that's all online. We're not going to rehash what happened with every single race, but it was a shame not to mention that it happened. So I think that's a good place to be. Speaking of events and cool things that happen on racetracks and fan events, Aprilia All Stars. Nick, can you tell us
all about it?
Yeah. What is it? How'd it go? You were there. Enlighten us.
Yeah, so All Stars started back in 2019. Oddly enough, Troy, Sihan, and I were there together just prior to the 2019 Aprilia RSV4 Factory 1100 launch at Mugello. That was the inaugural year. Bit of a special event because it was held at Mugello, and if you know MotoGP and World Superbike history, that's just a special place within two-wheeled racing, but also it's a culturally iconic sort of racing part of the establishment in Italy. But overall, All Stars is just a celebration of Aprilia as a brand, and we can look at it from sort of a start to finish perspective, because they bring out all of the old race bikes, or at least the ones that they have access to, that they've held on to over the years, dating back to, a lot of their successes in the 125 category, the 250 category, their push into the 500cc category, and then into modern four-stroke territory, which would have been stuff like the RS Cube, which is a 990cc three-cylinder motorcycle.
Not terribly successful.
Not terribly successful, but it introduced a lot of really cool technology. That was one of the first bikes to use ride-by-wire throttle systems in production racing.
There's also a really great picture of Colin Edwards jumping off of one that was on fire while he was riding it.
That is true. It's also famous for being on fire. But, outside of the fact that it just has a very interesting history, that bike in particular, because it was a Cosworth developed engine. And I think a lot of us will know Cosworth from automotive stuff, actually. So in all actuality, it was more of a half of a Formula One engine, or I think they're running V10s at the time. So, less than half. But regardless, the interesting thing about the engine, it sounds like an F1 car, but in two-wheeled form. And it was just an exciting bike at the time. Again, like Ryan said, not particularly successful. Jeremy McWilliams, who a lot of listeners will know from his racing endeavors over the years, KTM development, other things, Indian motorcycle development. He was racing King of the Baggers for a number of years in the United States. Nori Haga, like I mentioned, another racing legend. Colin Edwards, as Troy mentioned. But look, the All-Stars event brings out all those old bikes. You get to interface with a lot of this classic racing history that still runs, because not only do private customers bring out their own stuff, and Aprilia keeps in contact with these particular individuals, but they're also doing demonstrations with current riders that are associated with brands. So that's either factory riders, satellite team riders, et cetera, et cetera. And they're out there on the racetrack doing demonstrations. All Stars has been held at Misano Circuit, or Misano World Circuit, Marco Simoncelli, to be exact, after that inaugural year. And there's exhibition races, fan signings with, Bezzecchi, Marco Bezzecchi, British GP race winner. Jorge Martin was on hand as well. He was still recovering from his injury, so he didn't get to participate in the exhibition races. You had Rolf Fernandez, Ayagura, same situation as Martin, had a bit of a boo-boo the other day, but as of this recording, he raced at Mugello. As far as I know, he did, yes. And yeah, pretty sure. And overall, it's just a massive kind of celebration for the brand overall. But do you need to be an Aprilia owner to go? No, you don't. That's ridiculous. You just need to like bikes and also like free stuff, because the event's history, it's a single day event, happens every year, typically towards the summer months, late spring. And you get to go and just hang out with fellow bike fans.
And the event itself is also free?
Yes. So it is a free event. All you need is an active email to register. There are some VIP things that you could get a hold of. But realistically, look, I would say if you happen to work at an Aprilia dealer, just like if you happen to work at another dealer like Harley Davidson or Ducati, you should go to Harley Homecoming. You should go to World Ducati Week and understand your brand on a much deeper level. But yeah, it's a pretty exciting event and much different from what we were exposed to at Mugello. That was the inaugural event. Obviously, they've worked out a lot of different things and added to the program pretty heavily since then.
Well, so what was your experience like?
Overall, my experience was just exploring the paddock and taking in a lot of the bikes. I mean, that's not to completely latch onto this, but that's a big draw for me personally, because I'm slightly outside of the two-stroke generation of racing. I got into MotoGP probably around the very tail end of two-stroke. And being able to see that stuff, being able to see it work is pretty incredible. And yeah, they bring out the old RS250s, rev them up in front of the crowd and kind of get into the dueling two strokes. Yeah, that sort of stuff is really interesting to take in. And then of course that leads into a talk about the modern MotoGP bikes, which they have a plethora of. Of course, they have Alicia Spargo's bikes dating to the early days of that program. If I remember correctly, there was one of the CRT bikes was hanging out somewhere. So that was the reintroduction of Aprilia back into MotoGP in a modern context. And then they also have the current generation bikes. So Martin's bike was hanging out. So was Bezzecchi's bike. Lorenzo Salvadori was there with Bezzecchi doing demonstrations, but they also allow fans to get up close and personal with these things. And seeing a MotoGP bike in person, which I think at this point, outside of Dennis, we've all seen these things in person, correct?
I would imagine Dennis has seen one kicking around at a trade show or two, maybe. Either way, never mind. No, yeah, I mean, we've all seen the bikes.
Super bikes, yeah, but not MotoGP bikes, no.
Even a super bike, when you actually see these things in person and see the how intricate things are and just the race spec stuff, it's pretty incredible as a motorcyclist to check it out.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, all of the stuff like on the left switch gear, I think I was just checking out a Matt Oxley, social media post, and he mentioned that there were like 11 buttons on the left switch gear, which is just insane. Ride height, map changes, all sorts of stuff going on over there.
Yeah, so they're pretty complicated machines. Naturally, I kicked the idea of allowing a journalist to ride one, which Aprilia Racing personnel basically stared at me blankly for a while, thinking of ways to say, no, in a polite way. They actually did expand and highlighted that modern MotoGP machines are incredibly complicated. And there is some context for wanting to ride one of these things. Journalists used to get invited to an end of year event. It hasn't been done, if I remember correctly, since either 2002 or 2004. But, a 2-decade plus gap between MotoGP bikes from then to now is an incredible gap just in terms of time and technology. And I would say riding those bikes versus what people are riding now are much, 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 much different. Aside from activating ride height devices and being able to even maintain the pace to make those bikes operate in an even remotely safely manner.
They're much more removed, like now in this prototype stage of what, you used to be able to ride like somewhat of a normal motorcycle. Now it's basically an F1 car on 2 wheels.
Yeah. And there's been instances of automotive journalists trying to drive F1 cars. And because automotive journalists are beneath us, they had no success. So we'll actually stand a better chance. Shout out Auto
But we'll
Guide.
never know.
But I mean, to wrap up the discussion about the Aprilia All Stars event, Nick, you and I talked about it a little bit in my garage, the in-gear studio, but it really is a cool experience, and it's kind of similar to World Ducati Week and Harley Davidson's Homecoming, and just getting all of those fans together, and just like for people like us who spend all of our waking moments in the motorcycle industry, sometimes you can forget, exactly why we're here and why we got into this in the first place. And going to an event like that, you just, the passion, especially in Italy with an Italian manufacturer, is, I'm sure exactly pretty overwhelming. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a really cool experience. I'm glad that you got to go check it out and you got to do so many different things while you're there.
That's a big part of it, is just interacting with the fans. The exhibition races are definitely a huge appeal. They're really exciting to watch. There's obviously a lot of pageantry that goes along with it because it is a show, but you're getting to see racing on a much different level, and it's not in a professional setting, and it's a lot more intimate. It's seeing one of your favorite bands at a small venue versus the stadium, so to speak. And that can be a really cool experience. But yeah, just interacting with those people, like Ryan mentioned, we interface with motorcycles every day. It's what we do for work. But at the same time, we have to remember that the general working public, this is a hobby, something that they don't get access to, what the average reader or viewer isn't going to be inundated with. And I think it's even more special for that type of person. So if you're listening from North America and you want to go, look, plan a vacation around it, definitely make it happen. And that goes for any event like this. Is it a marketing event? Absolutely. Just get the free stickers and have a good time. Don't worry about it, man. So that's All Stars in a nutshell. We have a more in-depth video, but yeah.
Good stuff. And
Very
then,
cool.
I mean, in addition to the news we've already talked about, there's been some pretty interesting stuff that, Dennis has dug up as per usual, about some upcoming models. So I think probably one of the most anticipated and interesting is going to be that new Suzuki that you found some information about.
Before we get into these new bikes and potentially cool new bikes that are on the docket here, I think it's a good time for us to take a quick break to get a word from our sponsor. All right, quick break. Now that riding season's finally here, let's talk about the bike that's been reinventing the touring game for 5 decades, the Honda Goldwing. Whether it's a coast-to-coast trip or you just want to eat up some twisties and some serious comfort, this thing delivers. It has that powerful flat-six engine, available DCT for smooth, clutch-free shifting, and loads of tech that makes every mile smarter, smoother, and more enjoyable. It truly is the best bike for any bucket list ride. Check out the 50th anniversary Goldwing at powersports.honda.com. Sorry to interrupt, but making sure the sponsors are happy is pretty important. So,
got to keep the lights on around here.
That's right. All right, Dennis, you're back on. Suzuki's got something brewing. What's up?
Yeah, the GSX-8 platform that they've been running for the last couple of years. We've seen the naked GSX-8S and then the 8R. and then also the V-Strums using the same 776 engine. But they just received approval for a new variant, two new variants actually, the GSX-8T and GSX-8TT. I don't know if these are temporary names or model codes, or if that's the actual production name, but it might be. But the general assumption would be that these would be touring bikes.
Oh, I thought it was like maybe a touring bike and then a TT racer.
Yeah, like
well, we don't know.
I love that.
We don't know for sure what the T and TT stand for. The most likely thing is one of them will be a touring, a sport touring version, and the other one, some people are guessing it might be like a retro style bike. Some people guess it might be a more cafe racer. We don't know until we see it, but we're pretty excited for it.
What do we know about it?
Not
I mean, because did they mention like the same emissions or engine?
It's the exact same engine as the naked and sport bike. So you have the same or similar state of tune. We don't know anything about weights or dimensions or tank size or anything like that. That's going to come in hopefully in the next couple of months. But all we know is that the engine will be the same. It's not the same engine as the V-Strums, but it's definitely the same as the GSX-8R.
Which is, I mean, if there's something that Suzuki does well, it's build power plants. I mean, they've still using the K5 engine from way back when, and now that they've got this new parallel twin, I'm not sure if all of us have ridden this bike in some capacity. But I loved it when I first rode it in the V-Strom, and then riding it in the naked bike, stellar. I'm sure it was great on track with the 8R.
I mean, the 8R itself, you just put some saddlebags on it, and you've pretty much got a sport touring bike right there. So it's so comfortable as is. It's like, how much more comfortable can you make the 8T?
Some risers and let it rip.
That's why it's the travel squared, the TT.
There we go.
I think it's going to be, I think that is a perfect platform to build a touring bike out of. I mean, that engine is very well suited for touring duty. Like I said, the 8R, which is supposed to be a sporty thing, could easily be a sport touring platform right there. So,
and I mean, this is a formula we've seen before from Suzuki with the 1000cc bikes being in naked bikes and touring bikes and, what have you. So it's not terribly surprising, but definitely interesting. I think it's a bike that people, have kind of been asking for. It's funny to see how the industry moved away from sport touring bikes to like adventure bikes, basically. And there's been a little bit of a shift headed back that way. And Suzuki, also they have the GT models of the 1000 that are more classic sport touring. So I think people will be excited that it's kind of moving back in that direction. Going to have another offer from Suzuki in the middleweight category.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to see nature healing. And sport touring bikes come back in with 17-inch wheels, proper wheels, by the way. Not this 19 and 21.
The business. Well, if we're going to put our noses up at something, we should talk about the MV Agusta Superveloce 1000 Ago. How much does that thing cost, Dennis?
What a segue.
You have to ask.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right.
I know that I definitely can't afford it.
I think collectively, the four of us still can't afford it.
No, I wouldn't want to pay 25% of that either.
And that's why you're not selling your kidneys there, bud. Not committed.
For those curious, the price is $80,000.
$80,000.
And not just because of MV Agusta's 80th anniversary.
Oh, jeez.
Well, it's certainly a pretty motorcycle. $80,000 is a lot of money, though.
Can we talk about the key though? Because I think the key is the coolest part of the bike.
It's worth at least $20,000.
I mean, the bike is cool, but again, it's not tremendously different from the regular production Superveloce 1000. But the key, It's made from a piece of an actual trophy.
Please explain.
Go on.
Well, the trophy is the bike is a special edition tribute to the greatest of all time, with numerous accolades and world titles and race wins and
you talking about Mark
Marquez? Nice.
yeah.
We're on the same page. Or no, Giacomo Agostini. That's right.
Oh,
Yes,
right,
Agostini.
right.
And there are 83 units made of this, and each one comes with a key that contains a piece of a trophy from his own personal collection that he won racing. I mean,
wait,
it's a piece of history.
One of Ago's trophies has been submitted for sacrifice.
Yeah. They're like, here, melt this one down. It's my least favorite.
Is that the same?
He's got enough. He's got enough that he can spare one.
Is that the same as Jeff Bezos's ex-wife just donating her billions away to charity so that she can die with no money in her account? Is that kind of the same sort of thing that's happening here?
I don't think that it's the same as that.
No?
Huh. Yeah, but if you guys read the press release, the coolest part is that the bike comes with Agostini's scent on it as well.
That's right. Yeah, they actually have him slub himself all over each one of these 83 models, so you can really, breathe in the scent of a champion.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Wait,
especially in the saddle.
Current Ago or
we can't go back in time, so it's current.
I didn't know if when he got those trophies back in the day, he just kind of rubbed himself with it.
you might have.
He took his actual racing leathers that were unwashed for decades.
Ugh.
And just kind of rubbed it in.
Oh God.
Well, I didn't know if
here.
Yep.
Does
inside
current
out, get the inside out right in there.
Exactly. Does current Ago have to use Bengay or anything like that? Because that would be a very specific scent.
Okay, well, there's also the steering head that's made out of 18 karat gold, so that at least goes towards your $80,000
not
price
the steering
tag.
head, but not the steering head, but the little
a plate
that's on there.
Yeah,
a little plate.
Yeah, not the entire
actual steering head.
Probably wouldn't be good for chassis stiffness.
Yeah, I don't know the stiffness qualities of gold, but
yeah, I doubt I'd want a motorcycle chassis made out of it. But so that's wild. Why don't we lop off, I don't know, $75,000 and talk about our next bike?
Oh, you mean the Kawasaki KLX 230 DF and the Sherpa?
That's the one. What does DF stand for?
I could say it, but I can't say it on this podcast.
Yeah. Don't need to get canceled.
Family-friendly show. I was going to ask you guys, what does DF stand for?
Oh, it's Daddy Feed Me. Yeah.
Oh, man. So basically, these are two models. Like the KLX 230 DF, it's based on the KLX 230 we already have seen. Is it specifically the short model? I think it's kind of just set up to be a little bit more of a robust dual sport bike. It's got a rear rack on it. It's got a little bit more robust kind of front end. Not anything that's really going to change much for you in terms of wind protection, but it just seems like a little bit more of an outfitted, ready to go, cruise around the ranch, move some tools around and whatnot kind of bike. But nice low price tag. Someone want to talk about the Sherpa?
I mean,
the Sherpa is a shorter has a shorter seat height, so it's more accessible, but still a little bit more expensive than the base KLX. But it still has the hand guards. It doesn't have the rack at the back, but it has the hand guards, and I think some other bits too.
Yeah.
I guess the question is, what's the selling point here?
It's low. We're talking about bikes that are, 5,700 and 5,800, so under $6,000. And again, when I see it, I see, kind of a already purpose built dual sport for people that do want to just do, kind of slower cruising, backcountry discovery routes, just use it around small town, around the ranch, farm, whatever. I feel like it probably makes perfect sense for that. And obviously it's going to be a simple, engine, single cylinder, just a pretty basic bike that, I feel like we see it in comment sections all the time that some people are looking for that kind of thing. So, and obviously it didn't cost Cowie a ton of money to, build something off of an existing platform.
Right. Well, it's time to get to our special guest here.
Ooh.
He's been waiting a while. And
that's not really any concern of mine, but
that's fair. That's fair.
Who are you? Who would you want to bring on here?
Ladies and gentlemen, former Motorcycle.com staffer and still friend of ours, yeah. Tom Roderick, everybody. Hi, Tom.
Is this when you feed in the fake applause?
Yes, that comes later in the post edits. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I hear it in my head, anyways.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the time,
every day.
And what? So why is Tom here?
Why? That's a good question. I ask that frequently. Why is Tom?
Why? Where did he get? How did he get here?
If it was up to Ryan, it would probably be Goldwing related.
Tom is the Goldwing man still at Motorcycle.com.
Do you want to talk about the Goldwing first before we get into some other Hondas?
I think he's talked about the Goldwing plenty. Let's have him talk about another Honda, or maybe two of them.
So, Tom is here in sort of all seriousness. Tom is here because Honda introduced not one but two new CB models, the CB750 and the CB1000, and
SP.
SP, yeah, sorry. And Tom rode them both recently.
What?
Yeah, for a first ride, and his review you can see on the pages of Motorcycle.com, so go check that out. But if you want Tom's just voice to tell you all about them, he's here in the flesh to do just that. So yeah, Tom, tell us about it. Tell us about the event, the bikes, everything on your mind.
Not everything.
Well.
No. We'll keep it motorcycle related.
Thank you.
Sure. I mean, the event was cool. It was surprising at first because they wanted to do it outside of Sacramento, and anybody familiar with California knows there's not much except for fields surrounding Sacramento. It's flat. It's kind of boring.
If I'm being honest, Tom, when they sent over the intro and they told me it was Sacramento, I was like, I'm busy. And then I called you.
Thanks. It's the first impression you get. But yeah, after looking at the map, I mean, it was only 30 minutes to get from downtown Sacramento over into the Sierra Nevada mountain range, and then from there, I mean, it's awesome riding for anyone who spent any time in any mountain range for that matter. But yeah, Sierra Nevada it's a really good time of year. Minimal traffic because it was weekdays, so we had just kind of free reign of the roads, and they picked two different routes, one for day one for day two, and then they split the bikes into day one, day two. So half of the group was on the 750s, then half the group was on the 1000s. And as I kind of put into the story, Ryan Dudek was leading this charge. He's the press liaison at Honda, and he chose the 750 to lead everybody, which obviously is a smaller bike, less power than the 1000. And Ryan's a very accomplished rider, very fast. But still, it was a surprise that he chose that bike. And so the first day I was on the 1000, and a bunch of other fast riding journalists were also on the 1000. And none of us, like I said, were complaining of going slow. Ryan led a really good pace, to get your impressions and everything. You can't just, kind of meander down a straight road, right? We all need to feel what the suspension's like, what the engine does, what the brake does. And it just kind of made me curious for the next day. And then when I got on the 750 the next day, it was a surprisingly capable bike. Out of the two, it was my preferred bike. It was more comfortable. It's lighter, happier, just fun to ride all together. The 1000 is just more demanding. It's a bigger engine, it's more horsepower, more torque. It things can get, a little crazier, a little quicker. Not to put it down in any ways, it's an amazing motorcycle. But yeah, really like the 750. It was a surprise of the event.
And that's kind of, so, we're talking inline 4 with the 1000 and then a parallel twin with the 750. So what makes the 1000 an SP?
Suspension and brakes, largely. I mean, I think mostly that's pretty much it. I don't know. We don't get the standard model here, so
Right.
I didn't make a direct comparison to it because it's really doesn't matter to American riders. But yeah, it's got the Brembo Stylema brakes on it, and it's got the Öhlins suspension. The Öhlins shock, and then it's got a fully adjustable Showa big piston fork up front.
Right on.
And then the 750, that's the same engine in the Transalp, right?
Yes, it is.
And you rode that
Yes, it
bike
is.
too.
I did, and I made mention of that in a story comparison because the in the Transalp, yeah, when we were riding it, it just kept bouncing off the rev limiter like all the time. You would expect this kind of parallel twin with all the other parallel twins out there and their 260-degree cranks and whatnot, having more mid-range oomph. But the Transalp, just all the time, red line, red line, red line. So getting on this bike, it didn't happen as much. It had a much peppier mid-range on it, and to my knowledge, there's no difference in the internal architecture or whatever between the two bikes. So yeah, it just has to come down to a lesser weight, smaller tire.
Any final drive changes between the two?
No, they got the same gearing.
So,
but yeah, it was the Hornet was definitely a more robust mid-range engine to ride than the Transalp.
There you have it, folks.
So, well, give us. You've just said that you're a fan of the 750, but what are some redeeming qualities of the 1000?
Well, like I said, I mean, it's a bigger bike. If you want something that is, in the leader bike excitement range of motorcycles, the 1000 is definitely the one to get. I mean, the 750, it does have a shorter seat height. It was noticeable. I wasn't uncomfortable. I didn't feel pretzeled in. I'm 5'11", but the whole day aboard it, I didn't get off at the end of the day going, ouch, my knees hurt. But it was, it's shorter. So, if you want something with a more, say, I guess, normal seat height, the 1000 is going to be a little bit better bike that way. I thought the overall seating position, though, of the 750 was, actually better. The 1000 has this weird little ridge that is built in right along the bottom of the tank, which I can't figure out does anything more than just some sort of styling. I don't know. But yeah, it wasn't, totally intrusive, but just enough because your knees are resting right against it. And throughout the day, you're just kind of bouncing off this weird little ridge on the gas tank. But
So I guess my question would be, since you've ridden both of these bikes and they do have clear sort of demographics, 750 would probably be aimed at someone that's either graduating from a lightweight bike, going into middleweight. Leader class bike would be a little bit more serious. One of the first questions I have regarding the 1000 is, you've ridden basically not quite totally current, but within earshot of, the upper echelon of high performance naked bikes. Where does this thing fit? Because its MSRP in 2025 is a highly competitive $10,999. Now, when we think about Aprilia Tuono, Ducati Street Fighter V4, BMW S1000R and M1000R, those bikes are often double, if not way more in pricing. So where does that sit mentally with you?
That's actually a tough question, Nick. Yeah, I haven't ridden all the current stuff, so I don't know exactly where they're at, or if they are having some of the same issues that the Honda had, which primarily was the flat spot in the $4,000 to $6,000 RPM range. It was very noticeable. As there's no getting around it. It was, as the day progressed, I noticed it earlier in the day, right? And then we got to this one little photo shoot area with a hairpin corner. And the first couple times coming in, it was something like, yes, a second gear would be the gear you'd want to be in for this particular corner. And as soon as you would come out, I mean, you would throttle and it would just kind of until it, hit 65. So how the Honda compares, I don't know if, Tuonos or some of the other ones are suffering that same deficiency from the noise emissions that I understand. I don't know if, the more expensive bikes have got a workaround for that. I've heard it in some of the other motorcycles that are suffering from this, but you guys probably know better than me at this point. I mean, if you can, just flash tune that out, okay, no big deal, problem solved. And then it would probably be, I don't know if it's just as exciting as your Tuono or your, Super Duke R, but
for a third of the price, that's pretty exciting.
Right. So for the price range that it's in, it's surprising because yes, it has a pretty good electronic suite. It does suffer from not having cruise control. It doesn't have an IMU, so there's no lean angle sensitive traction control or lean angle sensitive ABS. So that's some of the savings that Honda built into the price of this bike. But the package that it comes with, I mean, it's pretty darn good. And I did write into the story as well. Like, I mean, it's quick shifter. It's just one of the best I've sampled recently. So smooth, so easy. I mean, just around town, first gear stuff. It would just, shift into first, second, downshift, upshift. It's really good.
No, that's really good to hear. I mean, I think different manufacturers have different approaches with electronics and things like that. And going back to the flat spot that you mentioned with the Honda, it is unfortunate that certain manufacturers are struggling at more than others. To our experience, Troy Ryan can speak to it, to some of the more 24, 25 models. Aprilia and Ducati seem to be managing that better. BMW with its inline 4 engines specifically are hit pretty hard, and some of the Aprilia middleweights, the Yamaha MT-09 is, we've documented that well. It's an ongoing issue, and Tom already mentioned the solution: ECU flash, which also opens up the conversation to full system, and then track days, and going racing, and spending all of your money, and really draining your bank account. But that's a side conversation here. What I'd like to bring it back to is the 750. So it's kind of an interesting bike because it's in that it's not quite up to snuff with, say, Z900, MT-09, 990 Duke, and it's a little bit bigger than your Z650s, your SV650, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of carving out its own little niche. So kind of, what do you think about that displacement? I mean, is it enough or not enough?
You could argue the 750 is going toe to toe with the GSX-8, though.
That is true. It does have one natural competitor. Yeah.
Last time we did a full run of naked bike comparisons, we did, lightweight to middleweights because things were kind of separated from like 650 to 900. And this is kind of, again, bridging the gap. So the middleweight market is kind of, all over the place at this point, which isn't a bad thing. You have a lot of options there.
Yeah, I mean, the GSX-8S is, going to be its most natural competitor out there. I think it walks that middle ground, again, between affordability and performance, which the 8S does as well. It'd be kind of interesting to see how they do compare to each other. It's been a couple of years since I rode that 8S. I think the Honda might have a leg up on it in just general terms, performance terms.
It's interesting that both bikes seem to be very close to being like pretty good bangs for your buck.
I would think so. I mean, price wise, yeah. I mean, what is it? 10.9 for the Honda, the 1000, the SP. I mean, that's considering its components, again, the stylemas and the all-in shock. It's coming pretty well outfitted for that price range. Absolutely. I mean, I could easily see somebody justifying, that motorcycle at 11,000 versus, your $18,000, $19,000 counterpart from one of the, more expensive manufacturers out there.
Yeah. Which I guess gives us a cool idea for a future story, right?
Oh, I think that's baked in, right? You saw all the comments on the website, man. There was like, everybody wants to see
This
that.
guy. Your headphones aren't going to fit over that head if it keeps getting any bigger.
I'm not taking responsibility. I just suggested the shootout, and it seems like everybody was interested in that.
Oh, no, I saw the
fake accounts.
Cool.
I saw the comments. They all said Tom Roderick should do the shootout, led by Tom Roderick, starring Tom Roderick. He should be the only rider on all bikes simultaneously. All of them.
Yeah, it's like one of those movies where one actor plays various parts.
Yes,
Exactly.
So I could be doing this thing, but kind of talking to myself in different windows. So, Tom, what did you think about it?
Exactly.
I'd pay you for that.
Comment below. Do you want to see that? Good stuff. I think we've Tom, have we drained this CB conversation for all we can out of you?
I guess so. I mean, I'm not sure what else I could say about it. Like I said, it's just, the 750 was the surprise bike out of the two. And again, I'm not trying to put down the 1000. I think I would love to ride if you guys flash a 1000, please let me know. I'd love to try it after having, the engine taken care of. Because I think, it would turn into a more potent naked bike. And then it would be kind of interesting to revisit the question of how does it add up or measure up to, some of the more expensive bikes out there.
Well, so like to close this out, I mean, in a vacuum, stock per stock, 1000 to 750. At the end of your ride with both of those bikes, if you were to go home with only one of them, which one would it be?
Yeah, it'd be the 750. I'd take the 750. Again, if it's one bike in your garage and you're thinking, okay, I got to commute if you go to an office every day and I got to commute on this thing, ride it on the weekends, and then maybe do, I don't know, some short touring trips or whatever. Absolutely. I mean, let's, stay aware. I did not mention track time. If one of your considerations is track time, the 1000, absolutely. I think the 750, you're going to, there's not going to be the cornering clearance you need, and you're going to just run into boredom, I think, with that bike. So if you want to do some track time, the 1000, but if that's not part of the consideration, then the 750 is the better all around bike. And then you're saving tons of money on insurance and registration and the MSRP, and you could take all that money and buy some better suspension and flash the engine and do whatever else you need to do.
You heard it here first, folks. Tom picks the 750.
Well, Tom, thanks for joining us. Appreciate everything you've had to say and everything you already wrote and said to the camera and whatnot. Always fun to have you out. Glad you're not around full time, but thanks for coming on here.
That was a nice little stab right at the end.
Wow.
All right. Well, thanks so much.
Everything was going great, and then
No, I couldn't help myself. No, always nice to chat with you, Tom. Thanks for joining us. And
Thanks,
I guess we'll talk to you later, buddy.
Yep. Appreciate it, guys. Take
Alrighty.
care. See you soon.
See you, bud.
All right.
Bye.
But Hondas aren't the only thing that we've been riding.
Oh,
Nick.
Go on.
Nick spent some time on some spicy meatballs, the RSV4, while he was in Italy. How has that bike changed? What was that experience like?
Yeah, so for this model year, this is one of those confusing sort of market-specific things. The 2026 Aprilia RSV4 Factory 1100 is known as a 26. If you're reading content from other markets, it may be calling it a 25. But there's some interestingness when it comes to the North American market and receiving bikes, whatever. This year's sort of I don't want to position it as a light refresh because it is pretty significant. There's been some changes to the bodywork. There's been some changes to the engine and a big revamping to the electronics as well. So what does that sort of add up to in a nutshell? It really goes in line with the theme from a lot of superbike manufacturers or manufacturers that are still participating in the superbike class, where they're trying to make these 200 plus horsepower beasts more rideable. There's a good reason for that, right? The RSV4 Factory 1100 is, as it stands, as of publishing this, it is the highest horsepower production motorcycle in existence right now. Of course, V4R with full system, et cetera, it can go above that, whatever. We're talking standard production models.
Which is what?
220 horsepower and 92 foot-pounds of torque.
Ooh.
It's a lot. The thing is, I would say it's a little bit more approachable. And the RSV4, if we look at its history, it's a bike that's slowly evolved over the years. It's not a bike that, unlike generations of the S1000RR, the Panigale, which they've, done full redesign, sort of thrown the Panigale or the Bavarian out with the bathwater, so to speak. They've really just evolved the RSV4. So when its introduction in 2009, you can sort of do a interesting, march of progress image that, dating back to the first ape, so to speak. And it's pretty interesting to see. Now, with the engine specifically, the updates, they've basically given it a larger throttle body, redone the fuel mapping overall. There's also some exhaust changes to that. It has a new exhaust, to meet Euro 5 emissions. Importantly, they've moved the catalytic converter down below the engine to help with radiant heat. And they've also given a new sump to accommodate that, so it doesn't lose any ground clearance or anything like that. Now, related to the body paneling, there's new aerodynamic features that are, I would say, integrated a lot better than previous generations. If we think back to that 2018 Aprilia RSV4 RFLE, that was actually the first production motorcycle to integrate MotoGP inspired aerodynamic features. They were just kind of on there, This is integrated a lot more appropriately and much closer to what a MotoGP bike would have anyway.
But it does still have the mustache arrow.
Oh, no, this is even more mustache.
Perfect.
Yeah, so it's much closer to Aprilia's RSGP MotoGP machine. But really, they claim just a reduction of about 6% drag. And then they also attach an 8% gain in anti-wheelie through aerodynamics. Now, those are tough claims to really measure on your own, but pushing on here, let's get into the meat of it and just keep this conversation fairly brief, because the full review will have all of the words, and then there'll also be a video corresponding with that, and you can take in Italianness there too. So RSV4, what do we know about it? 1099 cc V4 engine. The thing sounds absolutely sublime. It's 220 horsepower, 92 foot-pounds of torque. Those are numbers that will definitely make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. But with the advanced fueling, the updated fueling rather, it feeds that power in just that much easier. It's a little bit easier to control kind of everywhere. And there's a lot of torque as well. It's not an engine that requires you to keep it up, on the pipe, so to speak, which is really what I appreciate about the V4 engine configuration and why I think it's superior to both a twin and an inline four, because essentially it bridges the gap between the two and creates something that has the torque of a twin, but also the high-end performance of an inline four. And you're getting just massive, massive mid-range. So from an engine perspective, riding it around it, Misano World Circuit, Marco Simicetti, some of those tighter sections, that's where that torque really comes in easy, because you can often carry a gear taller and you won't get penalized for it. That does two things. One, it helps settle the chassis because you're not spiking the revs as violently, and it just makes it a little bit easier to ride. Good there. Okay. And then, of course, for those faster sections of tracks, you have 1,000+ cc of displacement to play with, and yeah, you can get going pretty good. We'll say it's a lot to take in. Now, kind of tying into that, Transmission, a couple little electronic tweaks there. We've been complaining about wonky quick shifters this year, especially from a brand that traditionally has done very, 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 very well with quick shifters, more specifically Ducati Street Fighter, Panigale V4. Ryan noticed that the quick shifter wasn't as great as it used to be because those things were absolutely stellar. Panigale V2, couple little hiccups. The Aprilia, chingon.
Oh man, high praise.
Going, backing down into first gear, in a handful of corners at Mazzano, slamming down into first gear can be a lot of work for a quick shifter, and the transition up down throughout the entire gearbox, super, super, super smooth and dialed. Great stuff there. On the electronics front, that's where I'd say a lot of this 2026/2025, depending on the market, comes. That's where this update really stands. Of course, we have the 8-level traction control with the little paddle shifters on your left hand, or paddle adjusters, I should say. It's a system that I think is really cool, and pretty much every manufacturer should integrate. KTM pilfered the idea wisely. I mean, I would too. They also have a remapped wheelie control system that integrates a predictive algorithm to what the brand says is it sort of learns your riding style and adjusts to you specifically. And then another new electronic feature is independently adjustable slide control. So we've seen that from Ducati, from BMW, and Yamaha as well. And slide control and traction control are, you can think about those things being linked, but traction control is really going to be managing that wheel spin. Slide control is going to be trying to manage that lateral movement. Okay. And then of course you have your 3 different engine maps, adjustable engine braking. And, the factory comes with all of the optional goodies that would be optional on the base model. The standard, you pays your money, you gets your bike the way it should be, as the good Lord intended. So that comes with, pit limiter, cruise control, cornering headlights, and it also uses Öhlins Smart EC 2.0 semi-active suspension. And that's important to know.
You said 2.0?
Generation back.
Okay.
So the Honda CBR 1000RR Fireblade RRR uses 3.0. The most recent Ducati V4s use 3.0, and the Speed Triple 1200 RS uses 3.0. That is the latest and greatest from Öhlins. Aprilia kept the old system in place mainly as a cost savings mechanism, not to drive up the MSRP of the bike. And they also added a feature. The RSV4s have always boasted turn-by-turn TC adjustment. And that dates back to, I think, 2015, if I remember correctly. But now the suspension can be set up turn by turn. Unfortunately, I didn't get to play with that stuff because I was riding it in a school setting. Multiple students were sharing bikes at the same time. So it just wouldn't have been kind to just start setting up a bike for me when there's, 2-3 other people riding a bike at varying skill levels all over the place. So, we're hitting the rough spots here. But
I mean, as the token American there, I'm surprised he didn't do it. But anyway.
Well, it still did some of it. But
my question for you is, the RSV4 has always been known as having one of the sweetest chassis out there. And with that kind of power and that chassis, that track, that back section, that super ridiculously fast right-hand turn, walk us through that. Was that just heaven on earth?
Yeah, I mean, that the thing that I've always loved about the RSV4 and why it's been a high choice for me, and weirdly the ZX-10R, which I've always viewed as sort of a poor man's RSV4 in terms of chassis. The chassis changes there are definitely for the better. Troy, as you know, the RSV4 has been a bike that it definitely benefits from a little bit more input. So arguably, comparison to something like Panigale V4 or BMW S1000R, the the RSV4 is going to require a little bit more input, probably require a little bit more energy out of the rider. The benefit to that is you get just an absolutely stout chassis with, front end to die for and a rear end that just hooks up. That's great. So in super high speed sections, the stability of it and the planted nature of that really comes through, especially in high speed sections like Curvone, because you're hitting that as you start getting up to pace, mid fifth gear, which is fast, like expletive word fast. And you definitely need something that you can trust that's going to be able to communicate slides and things like that to you nicely. Now, that's sort of the foundation that we're working from mentally here. And the changes this year in terms of the chassis really come from a couple of little things. So they've adjusted the pivot point a bit higher. So it's about 2 mil higher. So that's going to steepen that swing arm angle, kind of playing with some grip properties there. Actually, in theory, reducing the amount of rear grip that you have. They've also raised the position of the engine within the chassis because the RSV4 has always had that feature. Same with the adjustable pivot point. That's going to adjust your center of gravity. So now we have a little bit more leverage flipping left to right. So it's actually become a slightly easier bike to ride just thinking about those two things. And then, of course, they've shortened the trail a little bit because it has a new set of triple trees and the offset is a bit closer. Cool. All there. So basically, if you were to ride it, you'd be like, no, this is pretty similar to the sort of plantedness, the front end feel, the amount of drive that you can get, and just the way that it hooks up in terms of the RSV4. It is that it's delivering those characteristics that we know. However, it's also added some agility into the program. And then that big blanket of electronics and aerodynamics come in to sort of
bring it all home.
Yeah, bring it all home in terms of like all the other stuff. But yeah, is it still a ripping RSV4? Absolutely. Like that thing is sick.
I mean, probably not much of a surprise there, but yeah, I mean, making an already great bike and great package, overall better is
yeah,
better.
Yeah. And there's plenty more to say about the bike, which is why we have the full written story. But yeah, Mazan is awesome. You guys should go. Not just you guys in particular, but like listeners in general.
Yeah, get on that, listener.
Yeah.
Oh.
Speaking of other cool bikes that have been ridden recently, and this time on the dirt and not on the pavement, Ryan, I think you've had a very exclusive opportunity to ride something very cool, right?
Yeah, man. That was we get to ride a lot of motorcycles, but it's not every time we jump on a new bike, it's not a completely new experience, it kind of like the RSV4, it's building on an already great platform. But I got the chance to head to the Pyrenees, so basically on the border of Spain, France, and Andorra area, to ride the Stark Varg EX electric dual sport bike. And that's going to be a bike that's actually plated in the US. But so this is a fully electric dirt bike, and it's built, on a platform that is high performance. What we've seen with some kind of off-roadish bikes, from like Zero with the FX, those aren't like super high performance. You can get out and do the thing, but this is proper fully adjustable suspension at both ends, excellent Brembo brakes, and a completely, proprietary battery with, magnesium cases, a carbon sleeve, motor in the thing, similar to, I guess, what's used on a Tesla. But this is a very high performing motorcycle that's fully electric, and you can adjust the settings in terms of horsepower and regen that you can kind of think as engine braking by single percentages or by single horsepower. So if you want to get used to the thing and set it at 20 horsepower, you're good. But if you want to crank it up to 60, which is what the standard bike comes in, it's like 13 grand for this bike in the US, and it has 60 horsepower, which already kind of puts it above most of the 450, 500 dirt bikes on the market. But if you want to pay an extra grand, you get 20 more horsepower unlocked, and that is just software. It's not hardware at all. So, however you feel about that, I understand. But for an extra grand, you can get an extra 20 horsepower, put the thing at 80 horsepower. It weighs like 264 pounds. So it's not super light for what it is, but it's still plenty light for 80 horsepower. And after riding the thing, we spent most of our day on tighter trails and more technical stuff, really, than what we usually get to sample at a press launch. And we kept it at 35 horsepower. And I basically switched with a button on the fly to, you have 5 ride modes that you can flip between on the fly. And, for the most part, I did 35 horsepower, 20% regen or engine braking, if you will. And, what was cool about that is it was great, going uphill, but the minute you get into a steep downhill, you could click the button twice. And if you, depending on how you set it up, we had, map 3 was 35 horsepower, 70% regen. And I didn't even need to touch the brakes as I was kind of just hammering through, technical downhills. It's just a really interesting bike and concept and way of looking at motorcycle riding. And the bikes that we had the where the clutch lever would be. Obviously, there's no shifting on this bike. There's no brake pedal. Well, these bikes sold in the US will have a brake pedal because of regulations, but the bikes that we had the rear brake where the clutch is. And coming into it jet lagged as a completely new experience, I quickly asked if there was a foot pedal option for the rear brake, and there wasn't. So I was like, well, guess I'll just have to get used to this and try not to crash my brains out. And honestly, it definitely took some getting used to, but just like an hour into our ride, I felt like I was able to dial in rear brake pressure better with my hand than in a 10-pound motocross boot on my foot, which, probably shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. But it was really interesting and a unique experience to kind of be forced to learn how to modulate that. And yeah, I just felt like I was using the rear brake more and more delicately than I, ever could with a foot brake. But yeah, and then I think the other big takeaway of that ride is that there's just the way they have designed the mapping of the throttle and everything, which you can also change. Honestly, I don't know that I'd really mess with that, but you could change it if you want like a ton of torque right away or a ton of torque up top, if you will. You can change all that stuff, but what they've done a really good job of kind of mapping the throttle input because it's electric bikes are super torquey. So you'd think maybe it's going to be easy to spin this thing up while you're going up a rooted, rocky uphill, whatever. It's going to be hard to keep traction, but that's simply not the case. You can just dial that horsepower back, and then you've got a just incredibly tractable bike. And again, we did some pretty technical riding, and some of these uphills, you start sliding around or whatever. It was really easy to kind of like pause for a moment, regain composure, and then just get back on the throttle, and it would just keep that traction. And I think some of that probably comes down to the fact that I'm not thinking about worrying about the bike stalling, grabbing the clutch, shifting into the right gear. Like your brain just doesn't have to think about all of that. So you kind of have a little more time to really take in everything that's going on. It was a super unique experience. The bike is just really, really interesting. The range, if you will, they kind of quote it in hours, and the claim is like 1.3 to 6 hours on a charge, which is a huge range, like kind of ridiculous, right?
That's vague.
Yeah, and then they quote it like, oh, well, the 1.3 is with a pro enduro rider and 6 is with, your average Joe. And a press launch honestly isn't. We rode on our first day of riding, we rode for just under 3 hours, and I still had 56% battery left. And we were doing mostly tight enduro type riding. And then the following day, we set off at about 9:30 a.m., got to lunch by 1. And because this is a press event, you naturally had your van full of chargers to charge all of our bikes.
Always.
Right. Yeah. Just like anyone else would. But, I was down to like 25%. So I wouldn't have been able to do the rest of the ride had they not charged them. And they brought them back up to like, I don't know, something like 68%, and then we went and finished the ride. And it's a press launch situation isn't the best place to give you like great expectation of range and mileage and whatnot. So definitely already in talks with the guys to get one back here. And I kind of want to do a comparison between like that bike and, maybe a KTM or Husqvarna 500 dual sport, and just really see what the performance differences are, and see. Obviously, the range is going to be the limiting factor. That's no surprise, but at least we'll get a chance to have one in our hands and do a proper test and proper evaluation of the range and the riding.
But as far as the riding dynamics go, I mean, how much of a learning curve was there?
Honestly, it probably only took like 30 minutes to an hour for me to feel pretty comfortable. And all of the guys at Stark, CEO, CMO, whatever, all of those guys ride. And the moment we took off out of the camp area that we were at, Anton Voss, the CEO, had the front wheel in the air. I would say, over the entire ride, probably like a third of the time. And while we were out on the trails, we would kind of just pick a side area and basically push the limits of these things, see how far we could climb up a hill, whatever. And and the CEO, the other guys, they're basically just trying to one up each other the entire time. So like they're riding hard, and our group of jet lagged journalists are like, what? Okay, whatever. I'm going to try to jump this thing up the hill and then go up as high as I can, without crashing. And so it was a really cool ride, and it was cool to ride with the core team over there at Stark. Obviously, there are a lot of people that, make this business happen, but the guys at the top are absolute rippers.
So, electrics are always the, not the game changer, but the disruptor. And is there space for the Stark alongside gas bikes?
I haven't been that excited to get off of a press test and jump in front of a camera to like regurgitate my thoughts in a very long time. It got me super excited. I had a ton of fun riding it. It's a really high performance machine. And I absolutely think there is. I think, sometimes with marketing, when, a company wants to be punk rock about it or whatever, they kind of come into it with this attitude of, yeah, we're the disruptor, whatever, which honestly is a little bit played out and kind of arrogant. And I think Stark is doing that a little bit. I don't think it's a this or that situation, especially the way where we're at with battery technology now. I think it's, they can coexist. Same thing with, electric, cars and whatnot. It's not just going to replace it, not where we're at right now. But I think that they can definitely coexist. And Stark is doing some really cool stuff. They've got a really interesting, manufacturing facility in Barcelona, and it's pretty cool. They actually have a 3D, like a 3D titanium printer, which right now they only make the foot pegs for the bike, but they actually 3D printed an entire frame out of titanium. And I think it went from like 7.5 kilos for the standard frame to 2.5 for the titanium frame. And since they're not doing too much with that 3D printer, they also do some other fun stuff where if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll get to see this. But if you're not, I suggest you go to YouTube and check this thing out, because they 3D printed hatchets with a hollow handle, and this little Varg, which means wolf, is a bottle opener on the end of this thing.
All right, that's pretty slick.
Yeah, if you've got a 3D printer, you can mess around with it. But yeah, Stark is.
And how much does that weigh?
Less than you would expect.
But does it mount to the bike?
If you hit it hard enough, it seems pretty sharp. Yeah, you just stick it in the side.
You just like bang it into the side of the bike, and it'll just stay there.
Just ride into the battery and then pour water on it.
I wouldn't suggest it, but but it, very interesting stuff coming out of Varg, or very interesting stuff coming from Stark, for sure. Can't wait to get one.
Did you turn it into the, or did you put it into the full power mode? Because I'm wondering what 80 horsepower on a 200-ish pound vehicle would feel like in the dirt.
Yeah, it just lights up the rear wheel immediately. It's just like a constant spin. And if you're, you could probably just wheel yourself into, just perpetual motion. It's just absurd. Like I honestly, it cost $1,000 to unlock it. I wouldn't do it. There's just no point. I mean, hopefully, once we get a chance to ride the bike like out in the open California desert, that's the only way, the only place that I would think that I would maybe want that. But 60 horsepower is plenty. I mean, 80 is just, you're just constantly lighting up that rear wheel. And I guess one other interesting thing about the situation with Stark is when you order the bike, you can order it with your correct spring rates, and you can choose between like tubes and mousses. And these are all kind of things that don't sound like a big deal, but it's kind of like, why wouldn't a manufacturer offer that for you?
Because everyone should be doing that. That seems kind of, now that you mention it, that just seems obvious. Like,
right. And that's exactly the way I felt. It was like, well, yeah, why isn't everyone doing this? Because really, if you want your suspension to work the way it should, there's a good chance that you're not in that factory range, and getting the option to just have those correct springs from the factory, it makes a lot of sense. And if you, only plan on riding the thing in technical situations, I'd rather have mousses than tubes. So it's cool that Stark's, offering some logical options that we're not seeing from other manufacturers.
This all kind of goes to my theory of like electric isn't the problem as long as it's cool.
And yeah, there's no, of course there'll be comments about woke and whatever. It's just when you ride something that's electric that is just that intense, or could be that intense, or it just has a level of performance, it's you're just quickly reminded, like, yes, this is a motorcycle, and yes, I can push this to the limit and just have a great time on it. So but
let the comments flood in about how stupid we are.
Yeah. How wrong we are. Well, I mean, we've talked a lot, we've said a lot. I guess that's probably kind of wrapping stuff up over here, right?
That pretty much covers it, I think. We talked about the bikes we've ridden, the bikes coming up, some events. We even had Tom join us for a little bit. Do you really want to hear us talk even more?
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing that I definitely need to say is as a shout out to one of our listeners, Rylan Wakely, who is in the Chicago area. And he's been enjoying the podcast. He's been, listening to all of them. And of course, we really appreciate everyone that listens to this. And if you want to read an interesting story, check out the story of Rylan S. Wakely as a counter steer editorial thing that we did back in 2018. But pretty interesting stuff. And just wanted to say thank you to him.
Aw, shout out to Ryan. Well, with that, I don't have much else to add. Anybody else? Man. Yeah.
Dennis?
Anything, guys? Anything you want to add to this? Any interesting talking points?
Please don't.
That's already next episode.
That's right. Oh, yeah. Save the juicy bits.
All right. Fair enough. Well, thank you all for listening or viewing, however you're consuming this. Of course, there will be another episode. Episode 6 will come at you in a couple of weeks. And that one, all the even-numbered episodes, we will have a special guest joining us, or I guess in this case, joining me for a conversation. I don't want to give away too much about who this person is just yet because we still need to finalize some things. And the scheduling might not work out for this person to be on episode 6. So... it might have to be episode 8, but if
we'll have someone,
we'll have somebody for sure. It'll be a really good one. I'm super excited about this one. But yeah, lots of cool stuff coming in the pipeline here. But yeah, thank you all for watching, viewing. Leave us some comments. Let us know what you want to hear about next. Some stuff you want us to talk about. Leave your
review
feedback
the
about
podcast. Just give us feedback. A good
Spotify.
Feedback,
you're right. Spotify or Apple. Make sure you tell us or tell them that we're the best because
5 stars.
that'll help a lot. But yeah, good stuff, everyone. Thank you again for watching. And thanks to our sponsor, the 50th anniversary Honda Goldwing, for helping us put this together. And with that, yeah, we'll see you on the next one. And that's a wrap on this episode of the Bore and Stoke podcast, brought to you by Honda Powersports and the 50th anniversary Goldwing, celebrating 5 decades of redefining the ride. With that iconic flat 6 engine, ultra comfy ergonomics, and tech built for the long haul, it's the gold standard for a reason. Whether you're chasing horizons or heading out for the weekend, choose the bike that set the bar since 1975. Check out the 50th anniversary Goldwing at powersports.honda.com.